Hello, I'm Ali Murtaza, Head of Design at IDEATE Innovation. This is Daftarkhwan Insights. This is the third episode in the series Design in the World. It's called Design and War. We've done two before this, Design and Democracy and Design and the Law. We will either be doing one or two more after this, so you're welcome to attend those as well. I'm Ali Murtaza. I am the Head of Design and a partner at IDEATE Innovation. We're a human-centered design firm. We do a lot of research work in the development sector as well as user experience design, service design, and we can always talk more about the work we do later if you guys want. For now, we will focus on the talk. And this series that we've been doing, the idea behind this was just to explore what other areas in the world design sort of interacts with, which people might not expect. कि अगर आप किसी को कहते हैं मैं डिज़ाइन में काम करता हूँ, for instance at IDEATE या in my own work, I've worked in healthcare, agriculture, financial technologies, banking. A lot of people outside the design world or the sort of space that we occupy, उनको ये नहीं पता होता कि आप डिज़ाइन के थ्रू ये चीज़ें भी कर सकते हैं. So the idea was to also broaden it further and see कि डिज़ाइन के और क्या overlaps हैं with the world. So that was the concept behind the series. उसके अंदर today's talk is design and war. Potentially another one of those areas जो आप शायद connection कोई खास समझ नहीं आता एकदम से कि डिज़ाइन का क्या ताल्लुक है वॉर से. But we'll explore some of that. इसमें जो एक important aspect है वो ये है कि एक तो overlap क्या है that we'll be talking about, but also this is more of a storytelling exercise. So just to start off that conversation, war के context में what does good design mean? Like what's good design? Sure. That could be one interpretation. The deadlier the weapon, the better the design. Anything else?
Winning the war.
Winning the war. Good design helps you win the war, sure. So these are all areas that we can sort of, we will explore more of. I had a few things in my intro. We'll be talking about camouflage, about airplane cockpits and helicopter cockpits, guns, as you might be able to sort of guess from war. Does anyone know what this is? Yes, it's a song. And these are the lyrics. It's sort of a war anthem, peace anthem, more than war anthem. But these are some of the lyrics. War, what is it good for? Essentially, we'll also be talking about this concept. And the next part of the lyric is absolutely nothing. But we'll be talking about whether there might be something good out of war. So questioning that. Some of the stuff. Anything good that comes to mind आप लोगों के? War में से क्या अच्छा हो सकता है?
Innovation काफी आई थी World War II के बाद I think.
Definitely. Anything else?
I think you already said this. In the revolution, I think the second industrial revolution happened.
Right. So a lot of war leads to a lot of innovation, a lot of new things happening. Definitely. अच्छा इस space में before you guys came in. Do you see anything that you might expect to have come from either wars or military innovation? Okay, military ने बनाई है, and their main goal is always sort of building the war machine. Anything in this room that you can identify that might have come from that sort of a setup? किसी के jacket पे zips हैं? I think वो zip है ना? Zips are a military invention. Anything else? Internet use किया आज? Internet came out of DARPA. The precursor to the internet came out of DARPA that became the internet later. So a lot of interesting sort of things that we rely on every day came out of there. There's a can of corn over there. Canned food has innovated over war. As you might expect, अगर आप war पे जा रहे हैं expedition पे, you need to store food for a long time. So a lot of जो हम use करते हैं food preservation techniques have over time evolved because of war and military conflicts. This is a quick list of some of those things: duct tape, zippers, ballpoint pens. ये भी कहीं पढ़े होंगे. Ballpoint pen. Internet में लैपटॉप की तस्वीर लगा दी, मुझे इंटरनेट की तस्वीर लेनी नहीं आ रही थी. Corned beef की तस्वीर है, but again all canned food, similar. Pringles. Actually हर potato chips नहीं, but specifically Pringles came out of army research in the US. Any potential reason for it? Pringles की एक बहुत खास shape होती है. Everyone recognizes that? राइट और वो क्यों होती होगी, वाई डू प्रिंगल्स हैव दैट शेप, कभी आलू देखे उस तरह के? एंड प्रिंगल्स आर मेड आउट ऑफ एसेंशियली डिहाइड्रेटेड पोटैटो चिप्स। पहले उनका वो पूरा चूरा ही होता है ना, चूरा बनाते हैं, उसके बाद कंस्ट्रक्ट करते हैं एसेंशियली। सो इट्स अगेन अ डिहाइड्रेशन टेक्निक विच इज़ यूज्ड टू प्रिजर्व फूड। उसके बाद एंड द शेप बेसिकली मेक्स देम नॉट एज ईजी टू सॉर्ट ऑफ क्रम्बल ओवर टाइम, तो जस्ट लास्ट लॉन्गर। तो ये सारी वो इंटरेस्टिंग छोटी छोटी चीज़ें हमारी लाइफ में दैट हैव कम फ्रॉम सिमिलर मिलिट्री रिसर्च। वी ऑल्सो गॉट some other things out of war, a lot of destruction, of course, the atomic bomb, which again, that research led up to other things that we can use in life. Potentially, one of the main sources of energy that might be sustainable eventually will be nuclear energy. But again, there's that aspect of it, very destructive, potentially also we end up relying on the same innovation later on. Wars where की वजह से there have been around 187 million, again there's a lot of estimates range में, but 187 million deaths since the start of the 20th century, which is a very, very big figure, of course. Comes to around 1.5 million deaths a year, 4,200 deaths per day, 175 per hour. This is what 175 deaths looks like, just dots. ये है Alexander Fleming. इन्होंने पेनिसिलिन डिस्कवर की थी 1928 में, which essentially is the first antibiotic, समझ लें, that led to all other antibiotics that we use. This invention itself is often considered to have saved the most lives in human history. अब इसमें भी इंटरेस्टिंग ये है कि it was discovered in a lab in 1928. I think ये कैम्ब्रिज ऑक्सफोर्ड में थे, somewhere in England, एक यूनिवर्सिटी में. But it wasn't mass produced for quite a long time. बड़ा मुश्किल होता था प्रोड्यूस करना पेनिसिलिन, and you would have to take mold, उसके अंदर फ्रूट वगैरह के मोल्ड से आप प्रोड्यूस करते थे, but a very very difficult process. Eventually एक लैब में US में, which was run by Andrew Moyes in Illinois, उनकी लैब में ये finally mass produced हुई in around this time period. Any idea why might have been mass produced in these years? 1928 में डिस्कवर हो गई थी, mass produce होने में 14-15 साल लगे. World War II. So essentially एक चीज़ पड़ी हुई थी humanity के पास to save millions of lives and increase everyone's life expectancy. It didn't get mass produced or mass delivered until war हुई और US war में involve हुआ. उनको लगा कि we finally need mass production of this treatment ताकि वो war जीत सकें. That again becomes like a very interesting sort of topic of the two sides of it. वो लेफ्ट साइड पे जो थे ये एंड्रयू मोयस हैं, सेंटर में इनकी असिस्टेंट थी, who would go every morning. She worked very actively on this project. The third collaborator on this project is, ये क्या है? Garma. Any idea how the third collaborator in the mass production of penicillin might be a Garma? मैंने पहले कहा था पेनिसिलिन कहाँ से आती है? Sort of mold. So mold से आती है, जब कोई फ्रूट वगैरह मोल्ड होता है, ख़राब होता है, तो उस मोल्ड से एक्सट्रैक्ट होता था. मुझे अगेन साइंटिफिक प्रोसेस नहीं पता, but that was the source of where the eventual drug would come from. तो जो उनकी असिस्टेंट थी, who would go every day to get fruits, और वो रॉट होने के लिए लैब में रखते थे. उनमें से एक कैंटलोप था, विच इज़ अ गर्मा, जो कि जिसके अंदर से दे समहाउ मैनेज टू एक्सट्रैक्ट अ लॉट ऑफ पेनिसिलिन. वो कोई स्पेशल तरह मोल्ड हुआ था, विच देन बिकेम द पेरेंट, समझ लें, पेनिसिलिन सैम्पल फॉर ऑल द मास प्रोडक्शन ऑफ पेनिसिलिन इन दोज ईयर्स, विच इज़ स्टिल द forefather of all the antibiotics we use today. And you can see some of the ads from the time. So just like you can imagine कि एक uncured diseases थी बहुत सारी that were killing millions of people, suddenly उनकी cure आ गई है. This was very exciting, but as you would imagine, the allied forces did everything they could कि वही वाली जो medicine production हो रही थी वो उनके enemies को ना मिले. So there's a lot of इसका भी बड़ी interesting sort of stories हैं of how they hid all this treatment from their enemies, which again you can imagine lives save हो रही हैं, कर सकते हैं बहुत ज़्यादा लोगों की, पर आप नहीं करना चाहते because वो उस साइड पे हैं. And that becomes like another sort of a place where this sort of intertwining of the good and bad kind of come in together. अच्छा, इसमें अगर आप उस वक्त World War II में एक डिज़ाइनर होते और आपको मिलिट्री कह रही होती कि ये पोस्टर्स डिज़ाइन करें ताकि लोग पेनिसिलिन ले सकें यूएस आर्मी वाले. Is there anything wrong with designing them? Would there be any moral ethical issues? No? Okay. अब किसी को कोई लग रहा है कोई मसला इसमें क्या? सही है. Sounds good. उन्होंने इससे थोड़ी देर पहले क्योंकि कोई ट्रीटमेंट अवेलेबल नहीं था तो जो भी इन डिजीज़ के कॉजेज़ थे उनके लिए ना बेसिकली बहुत ज़्यादा कैंपेन्स होते थे सिर्फ उन पे फोकस्ड कि आप किस तरह STDs ना हो आपको. पर देयर वर डिफरेंट टेक्निक्स दैट वर यूज्ड इन मास मीडिया एट द टाइम. वन ऑफ देम वाज कि आप बेसिकली कह रहे हैं अपने सोल्जर्स को ही कि आप जो हैं अपने मुल्क दुश्मन है एसेंशली इफ़ यू गेट एनी ऑफ द STDs क्योंकि यू आर इररिस्पॉन्सिबल एंड इफ द US और द एलाइज लूज द वॉर इट्स बिकॉज ऑफ यू. एज यू वुड एक्सपेक्ट बहुत ज़्यादा उसमें द ब्लेम गोज़ टू वुमेन कि आपके सोल्जर्स जो हैं उनको डिजीज़ हो रही हैं सेक्सुअली ट्रांसमिटेड बट यू फाइंड अ वे टू ब्लेम द वुमेन इन सम अदर एरिया and that was part of the propaganda sort of posters that they were creating. She may look clean but and that's just the poster and you can imagine इसकी sort of implications क्या हैं. कुछ posters थे क्योंकि war time पे savings बहुत ज़रूरी होती हैं कि आपके लोग पैसे ना खर्चें bonds खरीदें government के essentially taxes बढ़ाएं. उसके अंदर propaganda posters में Uncle Sam is the figure that the US military uses. तो उसके अंदर this is one poster just encouraging essentially kids in the US to save for the country. There was also this poster. Gas shortage thi, you need fuel for the army. You're trying to get people not to use more fuel. Is this poster okay to design? I'm not going to question you on that. I'm sure if we were living in the US at that point or anywhere in the world जहाँ जिनकी enemy Nazis थे, we would be like, oh great, like let's scare everyone into doing this. Now reflecting back, we're like, this seems a bit dodgy. But again, that's an interesting, I think, thing to always think about कि हमारी जो current reality होती है, we might, unless we have a way to just think on a bigger scale or reflect on our own work or our own context, तो उसको जज करना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है. आई एम श्योर उस वक्त किसी को गलत नहीं लग रहा होगा जो नाज़िस से फाइट कर रहे हैं. बट देन यू कैन ऑल्सो लेटर सी कि अच्छा शायद there could have been better ways of doing this potentially. This is a camouflage pattern that the US military made and they spent $5 billion in creating and disseminating this over a course of around 10 years. उसके बाद 2014 में it started getting phased out. अभी तक कहीं ना कहीं exist करता है. पर yeah, $5 billion is a lot of money to spend on a camouflage pattern. And the intent was for them to become invisible. What ended up happening was the soldiers became more visible. Probably not ideal for a camouflage pattern. ये किस तरह हुआ? We'll just talk about that in a bit, but I find the story really interesting. So this is what the pattern looks like on soldiers. I'm sure looking over a land that is clearly their own. No questions there. This is what the pattern looks like, sort of zoomed in, flattened version of it. And it was called the universal camouflage pattern. There's a quote about this that I really like from somebody in the US military. Universal uniform that universally failed in every environment after spending $5 billion. So not so great design. This is what camouflage patterns have looked like for the longest time. I think it's a normal pattern that we can probably see in places around us as well. ज़्यादा organic type आपको curves नज़र आते हैं. Looks more natural. Is used by militaries all over the world and has been for the longest time. While that was used for the longest time, there's a military officer in the US called Timothy O'Neill. Obviously, this is not true. Discovers pixels, but he discovers that you can make camouflage with pixels. पर एक जो camouflage pattern exist करता था pixels वाला उस वक्त, that was the Canadian armies. ये उनका pattern था. So the US could have just taken their pattern if they wanted to use pixels because there are some advantages. पर एक उसका problem ये था कि the Canadian army had copyrighted their camouflage pattern. My last talk was about design and the law and उसमें मेरा continuous theme ये था कि lawyers ruin everything. So ये भी यहाँ भी apply करता है. At least US Army के लिए ruin कर दिया. कि copyright था वो use नहीं कर सकते थे. One of the reasons why pixelated camouflage was starting to sort of become popular और useful था, वो एक effect होता है जिससे आपको essentially organic environment में pixels की तरह के जो shapes होती हैं, our brains kind of just ignore them as white noise. क्योंकि our brains are looking for organic patterns in those environments. Or our perceptual system just thinks of that as like एक पीछे essentially just ignores कि यहाँ भी कुछ है. So works kind of like white noise. These were the 4 colors that the US military then chose to build their universal pattern. उसमें से this was the first camouflage that they came up with. उसके बाद this took 3 different forms. These are the 3 uniforms. US Marines के थे ये. The left one for desert environments, urban environments, and woodland. One of their hypotheses was that different environments need different kind of camouflage. It being the US military, they are everywhere, and you need different uniforms for all these different environments. फिर इसमें थोड़ा सा मसला ये हुआ कि मरीन्स ने ये यूनिफॉर्म बनाया और मरीन्स ने कॉपीराइट कर लिया. आर्मी और मरीन्स 2 डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं. आर्मी स्टिल कांट यूज द मरीन्स कैमोफ्लेज. अगेन लॉयर्स रूइनिंग एवरीथिंग. सो आर्मी ने कहा कि हम लोग अपना यूनिफॉर्म बनाएंगे यूजिंग मोर लेस 2 ऑफ द 4 कलर्स दैट वर यूज बाय द मरीन यूनिफॉर्म्स, वो जो पहले वाले पैलेट में से थे, एंड ब्लैक अलोंगसाइड इट. And essentially these are the 2 colors that they were going to use for their uniforms. एक थोड़ा green type है, एक थोड़ा brown सा है, and they created these pixelated patterns for the uniform from this. थोड़ा सा मसला ये हुआ कि उन्होंने ज़्यादा यूज़र टेस्टिंग के बगैर वो अप्लाई करना शुरू कर दिया because they were already struggling with not being able to they've been struggling to find the right pattern. उसके बाद वो सारे copyright issues and all of that. So once they found a pattern, they just applied it as much as they could. Or you can imagine around 2004 or 5 बहुत ज़्यादा US Army busy थी दुनिया में, and so there were a lot of application that happened very very quickly. Soon discovered this concept called isoluminescence. ये इस पे आप you can read up later. It's a very interesting concept. But what ended up happening was कि ये जो 2 colors थे उन्होंने select किए थे, they in these environments that they were in, जो कि desert environments थी, they hadn't quite figured out or thought about or user tested properly things like shadows, उस तरह की environment के अंदर क्या होगा. And isoluminescence जो होती है वो ये करती है कुछ patterns and कुछ colors को environment में as flat आप perceive करने लग जाते हो. So you have these color pixels दूर, you obviously can't see the pixels. The way the 2 colors merged at a distance in those desert environments, where people would see them as almost grey flat colors. Not ideal if you want to sneak around कि आप एक flat object जा रहे हैं 3D world में, if you want to use camouflage. And that ended up not working very well. So the camouflage pattern died sometime in 2014 alongside $5 billion and potentially a lot of soldiers. On a lighter note, if we have to design a chair for all of us, let's go into designer mode now. हमने एक चेयर बनानी है, ऑफिस चेयर अच्छी सी, एंड आई वांटेड टू फिट रियली वेल फॉर ऑल ऑफ अस. किस तरह बनाएंगे? व्हाट डू वी डू? लाइक जस्ट द पीपल इन दिस रूम, हम कहते हैं हमने एक चेयर बनानी है जो हमारे लिए अच्छी फिट करे सबके लिए. हाउ विल दैट वर्क? व्हाट शुड द प्रोसेस बी?
रिसर्च फर्स्ट.
क्या रिसर्च करेंगे?
सबसे पूछेंगे नीड्स क्या है सबकी.
श्योर. उसके बाद उसकी फॉर्म किस तरह आएगी?
फॉर्मेट्स बनाएंगे और यूजर टेस्टिंग करेंगे.
राइट.
और आप लर्न करेंगे और फिर इटरेट करेंगे.
यस. अनफॉर्चुनेटली आप उस वक्त US आर्मी में नहीं थे. उन्होंने एयरफोर्स एक्चुअली दे हैड टू डिज़ाइन कॉकपिट्स फॉर प्लेन्स इन द 50s जब 40s and 50s जब बहुत ज़्यादा एयर वॉरफेयर हो रहा था. And obviously they could see that this would be a bigger part of all military conflicts. तो उन्होंने कहा हम कॉकपिट डिज़ाइंस जो हैं अपने वो स्टैंडर्डाइज बनाएंगे so that it fits everyone. One of the ways that they did this was कि around 4,000 something उन्होंने मिलिट्री पर्सनल को की मेजरमेंट्स की बहुत डिटेल्ड के पूरी बॉडी मेजरमेंट्स लेके उनको डॉक्यूमेंट किया टू डिज़ाइन दीज. एंड द आइडिया वाज कि आप सारे सबके साइज़ कर लें, उसके बाद उनकी एवरेजेस लेके then design the cockpit in a way that would fit the average size. So this was actually a picture from another book, but this was going on, research like this was going on at the same time. Essentially इस तरह की उन्होंने measurements करके हर चीज़ की they created this idea of the average pilot from these 4,000 or so people, right? A quick question for you guys. How many legs does an average human have? Quick answer. इतना मुश्किल question तो नहीं है. Everyone's saying 2. शुक्र है math exam नहीं है. Because less than 2. Because even if there are a billion people and one of them doesn't have 2 legs, the average has less than 2 legs. Does that make sense? 1,000,000,099 million. Math नहीं करना पड़े शायद मुझे. खैर, sure. So the idea is that averages are often very misleading. Where you might, and weirdly enough, all of our sort of instinctive understanding of averages is also often very skewed. GDP per capita एक unit, एक number होता है जो quote किया जाता है for different countries. If you look at other countries that are in the similar band as Pakistan for GDP per capita, income disparity पाकिस्तान में बहुत ज़्यादा होगी उनसे. Because average वहीं आ रही है, पर उसमें मलिक रियाज भी है, और वो homeless इंसान भी है, और average कहीं middle में आ रही है. पर वो उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि दोनों are somewhere close to the average. This is just one slight tangent, but one of the reasons why averages are kind of misleading and we think of them instinctively in different ways. Okay. So जिन्होंने average human बनाया, average pilot बनाया out of all the data, how many of the 4,063 pilots जिनका data लिया गया था, do you think fit the average pilot on all the parameters? Any guesses? Guess कर लें कोई भी number. 0. Yeah, because no one is average on all their body parts, right? Again, a slightly instinctive misunderstanding that all of us have. कोई average human नहीं होता जिसके सारे body parts average होंगे, right? That's a very weird concept. Ken dolls नहीं है हम, but that's like instinctively we think that averages should work, right? Because it's all of us. So what ended up happening was they designed cockpits based on the average, then saw slowly कि crashes बढ़ गए. जो response times थे pilots के to use the functions in the cockpit that they were supposed to use, वो slow हो गए. After they had designed this new cockpit, very mathematically data-driven design at that point, and that's when somebody realized कि कोई मसला हो सकता है. I think one of the younger sergeants था शायद. And then he did that study कि वो जो 4,096 है उनमें से average को fit कौन करता है? That question I asked you, and the answer was 0. And that's when they realized कि designing by average is probably not a good idea. और ये industrial design में this is a concept that you learned very early on कि that's not a way to design कि आप सबकी average लें और उसे design for that average person because the average person doesn't exist. This is the quote from the person who did the research. If you've designed a cockpit to fit the average pilot, you've designed it to fit no one because that person doesn't exist. Any idea why suddenly I might have made this jump to a school? I didn't think of that, but sure. So my sort of thought was that one of the things I really struggled with in school, I don't know कितने लोग relate कर सकेंगे, was that let's say मैं 8 subjects पढ़ रहा हूँ, grade 9 में हूँ मैं. What's the perfect student for a Pakistani school जो 8 subjects में average हो, right? आप किसी में exceptional नहीं है, so किसी subject में आप ज़्यादा questions नहीं पूछ रहे या you're not ahead of the class, किसी subject में आप below your class नहीं है, you're the easiest student to teach. Right? Because our whole education system is based on assuming that everyone needs to be average. And also we shouldn't then be surprised that we don't produce innovators and all of that. क्योंकि बहुत कम कोई students होंगे जो 8 subjects में equally interested होंगे और somehow उसी level पे होंगे. And again, that's like a weird thing that we're all taught to sort of live with because that's the system we've been through. Any idea what this place is? Random park, sure. है तो park ही. अब कुछ पता चल रहा है? What sort of place is this? It's a memorial. So it's a memorial, I think very pretty, really beautifully made, with names of the victims here. हर जगह पे लिखे हुए हैं. And a lot of these memorials are very pretty, very peaceful. Does anyone know of the Sandy Hook massacre? US में हुआ था, school में बहुत ज़्यादा एक mass shooter killed a lot of kids. तो उसके बाद that's the Sandy Hook Memorial. So वो बच्चों के नाम है. It's a very like I think the place has this very thoughtful design to it. This is another memorial. Any idea which one? This is the Vietnam War Memorial. This is the Normandy Memorial. So you can also, again, there's some interesting themes here. Just some images of the 4 or the 3 memorials that we've seen. Can you see any sort of patterns here from the designer? Any commonalities? Greenery, sure. Yeah. Anything else?
Serenity.
Yeah. So I think there is a very interesting pattern, even if it might not immediately, sort of the maps might not look the same or the memorial might not end up looking the same. one of the big intents is again some of the same stuff, serenity, थोड़ा सा repetition, almost like, और इसमें एक interesting चीज़ ये होती है कि a lot of these techniques that are used in memorials are also used in religious buildings when you design them, because वो intent somewhat similar है कि peace feel हो लोगों को कुछ किसी तरह का तसल्ली मिले essentially, because some of that same sort of feeling that you want to inculcate in the visitor वो similar है. Again, these are all design choices. These all exist because of wars and massacres that humans unfortunately do to each other. But there's an opportunity for design to somehow bring some level of solace to people as well. इनको डिज़ाइन करने में कोई moral ethical issue है? Coming back to the same question from earlier. For sure. अब वही वापस चले जाते हैं. Right. So one of the things might be a Vietnamese person might disagree with you on the Vietnamese war memorial, right? They'll be like, हमारे मुल्क में आके हमारे लोगों को मारे, अब आप peaceful memorial में आने अपने soldiers के लिए. So again, there are these gray areas and difficult sort of things that it's very important for designers, I think, to understand other people's perspectives. ठीक है, ये कोई नहीं कह रहा कि आप ना बनाएं, but at least understanding कि हमारा काम complex होता है when we talk about complex subjects. It's not, we shouldn't look at it from a very singular point of view जो हमें हमारी side का में भी होगा. Same question. Any ethical issues with designing guns?
जब तक डिफेंस करना है उसका कोई मसला नहीं.
ये आपको कैसे पता चलेगा कैसे यूज़ होगी गन? Right, so that's a moral issue for sure. I would never personally choose such a job where I am designing a weapon that is intended to kill, right? But I also understand that you need those weapons in the world that we live in. So I'm also probably not going to judge somebody else who chooses that job. So I think this is a very personal issue, and there are sort of arguments to be made on both sides. In an ideal world, we shouldn't need to design them. We don't live in an ideal world. So that I think that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. Frankly, like it might also depend on the context. अभी मैं कह रहा हूँ मैं नहीं डिज़ाइन करूँगा, कल को वॉर हो रही हो और मैं वो मुझे चूज़ करना है कि मैंने इनरोल होके या तो फील्ड में जाना है या मैं इंडस्ट्रियल डिज़ाइनर हूँ, मैंने फैक्ट्री में गन डिज़ाइन करूँ, मैं प्लीज़ बंदूक बनाओ मेरे से. So again, just like the complexity, I think is important to understand.
No, but you can, guns and weapons are also used to make peace.
Sure.
Right, like atom bomb बनने के बाद कोई World War नहीं हुई.
Right.
Because we know that if we have a war,
right,
we're both going to die.
Yeah, mutual destruction wala. No, for sure. Again, that's the complexity of it. Do I want to work on a project that is meant to be designing an atom bomb? No. But will I say that anyone who does means to kill people? No. Because there is complexity to it. Carl Sagan का एक quote है, I forget the exact quote, but the idea is कि अभी Cold War का quote है, तो USSR in the US making more atom bombs is like two people in an oil tanker making more matches. एक से भी काम चल जाएगा. You don't actually need 5,000 more, but that's a separate discussion. अच्छा, इसमें just a quick discussion. What does it mean for a gun to be well designed? Well designed gun क्या होती है?
Do its job.
Kill someone. Say accurate, kill someone. Anything else?
Easy to use.
Easy to use, lightweight. ठीक है. So a good gun is something that helps you kill more people more easily.
Yes, exactly.
Sure. इसमें कोई human centered design आ सकता है? Grip could be like ergonomic, easy to use, right? सही है. So human centered design could be used to kill more people more easily, right? Interesting. And that was the point. Like I just want that. I think just like understanding the weird sort of complexities of it. इसके अंदर there's another discussion in human-centered design, which I believe very highly in. My firm, the main first thing is human-centered design, right? But one of the things that we often think about is कि guns को छोड़ दें. Let's look at, let's say मेरे पास कोई fashion brand आता है और मुझे कहता है कि आप मेरे लिए ज़्यादा comfortable कपड़े डिज़ाइन करें, shirts डिज़ाइन करें that sell more quickly and they're also cheaper, right? And I might design it, and I might design it to be really comfortable, all of those things, and it might be human-centered from that perspective. But if that brand ends up doing really well, let's say it's a fast fashion brand, H&M type कोई होता है, बहुत ज़्यादा शर्टें बेचते हैं वो लोग, बहुत ज़्यादा बिकती हैं, फैशन में आ जाती हैं, people wear them, throw them away. Overall, potentially there's more destruction to the planet being caused which might not have been caused अगर मैंने बहुत अच्छी shit ना design की होती. So then the question that then becomes human-centered design for which humans, right? वो उस human के लिए जिसने वो पहनना है या वो future humans के लिए जिन्होंने इस दुनिया को occupy करना है या इस दुनिया में रहना है जिनके लिए I might be making conditions worse. Let's say plastic bottles probably are a better example actually. So just sort of again understanding the complexity of those questions about when we talk about human-centered design, user centricity, वो users कौन हैं जो system में आ रहे हैं और कौन है जो नहीं आ रहे. इसका बहुत एक personal example currently ये है कि we are working on a bunch of projects, all of them in financial digitization. State Bank के साथ भी हैं, कुछ private entities के साथ भी हैं. We might be working with the World Bank on similar essentially digitization of payments, right? Multiple projects. I think it's a very good thing for the economy कि आपकी payments digitize हो जाएं, merchants digital payments लें, taxation बढ़े, especially अगर state bank के साथ करते हैं, potentially really nice benefits to the economy. But I also know कि जहाँ भी digitization होती है, surveillance बढ़ती है, privacy कम होती है, जो लोग पढ़ लिख नहीं सकते, जिनके पास tech का access नहीं होता, वो system से बाहर होते हैं. So then for us as a human-centered design firm, we need to figure out where the balance is. कि अगर हम कल को सारा कुछ digitize कर दें, how many people does that leave behind and who does it really benefit? Back to that image again. वो पुराने वाले camouflage का. And the cockpits that we talked about, जो कि ended up with worse outcomes than they were than existed before. And the initial slogan. So what is it good for?
Good design.
Good design. Some good design comes out of it. Anything else?
Good for the economy.
Good for the economy. Very good for the economy generally, long term. Anything else? Unless you lose the war, then it's very bad for the economy. Anything else?
Politics के लिए भी अच्छी हो सकती है.
For sure, yeah. Can be used for it, for sure. Anything else?
Population control.
I mean, can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. Anything else?
Power.
Sure, yes. I'm not promoting war, by the way. मुझे रिपोर्ट ना कर दे. ये बंदा है. इस स्लाइड की तस्वीर लगी हो साथ. Thumbs up. सही है. So we've discussed कि it's not quite absolutely nothing, but again, not promoting war. Thank you. That was the whole talk.
VR और जो ऑगमेंटेड रियलिटी है उसका फ्यूचर में आप डिज़ाइन कैसे देखते हैं, क्या होगा, क्योंकि अभी तक वो इतना पॉपुलर नहीं हो सका.
Right. ये एक्चुअली इंटरेस्टिंगली डिस्कशन हम आज पहले कर ही रहे थे. My biggest thing with VR is कि I think the biggest hurdle right now is on the hardware side. Miniaturization नहीं हुई hardware की. Like it's very very difficult to make, for instance, VR goggles that anyone wants to wear for more than like 5 minutes maybe. But also if you look back at जब cell phones शुरू हुए थे, and if you had told somebody early 90s में कि हर बच्चे की पॉकेट में सेल फोन होगा और वो पूरा दिन उसको देख रहा होगा, वो कहेंगे आपका दिमाग ख़राब है. नहीं कि कौन लेके फिर रहा होगा पूरा दिन. तो आई थिंक इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू प्रिडिक्ट कि वो क्या ट्रजेक्टरी होगी. बट आई थिंक फॉर इंस्टेंस मेटा हैज़ बेट आई थिंक $3 billion a quarter अभी वो कर रहे हैं, बर्न रेट है उनका. बट देयर बेट इज़ के समहाउ दे विल, जब इससे पहले कि वो बैंकरप्ट हो जाएं, the miniaturization will happen and they will make it to the cusp जहाँ they are the first ones sort of leading that race. Also if you look at just like failed predictions about technology, so I don't want to be in that list ever. जो I think 1900 में किसने कहा था कि प्लेन कभी नहीं उड़ेगा, 5 साल बाद उड़ रहा था. Stuff like that. But that generally I think miniaturization अगर हो जाएगी, whenever VR will definitely become much more ubiquitous.
आप एवरेज के ऊपर बात कर रहे थे. मतलब आपका स्टांस थोड़ा सा ऐसा था कि ज़रूरी नहीं कि एवरेज के ऊपर चीज़ें आती हों, लेकिन जब हम वर्ल्ड में एक कंज्यूमर बेस को देखते हैं, कस्टमर बेस को देखते हैं, तो उस लेवल पे हम एवरेज देख रहे होते हैं. अब इसकी एग्जांपल इस तरह से, मैं गलत भी हो सकता हूँ, कि करीम है जैसे या उबर है, तो अब कोई एलीट क्लास भी है और कोई वो भी है जैसे मेरे जैसे बाइक पे भी जाते हैं. ठीक है. तो थिंग इज़ कि वो सब यूज़ कर रहे हैं, इवन दे हैव कार्स एंड बाइक्स, लेकिन वो सर्विस सब यूज़ कर रहे हैं.
बिल्कुल.
ठीक है. एक तो वो चलें बिजनेस मॉडल अच्छा है,
बिल्कुल.
लेकिन देखिए वहाँ पे भी तो उन्होंने पर्टिकुलरली एवरेज देखी होगी कि ये एक पेन पॉइंट है, ये एक यूज़र का प्रॉब्लम है, इसको सॉल्व करना है, और उन्होंने एक मैसिव लेवल पे देखा होगा इस चीज़ को. तो मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है कि एवरेज इंपॉर्टेंस रखती है बहुत ज़्यादा डेटा और फिगर्स के अंदर.
राइट.
तो आपका क्या ख्याल है इस बारे में?
नहीं, आई थिंक बड़ा अच्छा क्वेश्चन है. इसमें थोड़ा सा एक इंटरेस्टिंग जो नुआंस है वो ये है कि लेट्स से कि करीम कहता है कि हमने एक सर्विस बनानी है जो लेट्स से सारे पाकिस्तानियों के लिए applicable हो. What does the average Pakistani look like? Quick question, like 21.
लोअर मिडिल क्लास.
Sure. अब वो लोअर मिडिल क्लास आ गया, राइट? आपने वो लेट्स से इनकम कितनी होगी मंथली? एनी गेसेस? अगेन कोई ऑब्वियसली एक्यूरेट नहीं हो सकता, गेस कर लें. 75,000 हाउस होल्ड इनकम. एजुकेशन लेवल क्या होगा? ठीक है, लेट्स गो. और क्या होते हैं ट्रेड्स? या एज क्या होगी? 30 कर लें, किसी ने 27 का, किसी ने 35 का, तो 30 कर लें. मेल है फीमेल है? श्योर. थोड़ा सा फ्लॉ नज़र आ गया आपको? अच्छा, अब ये चलें उसको जेंडर को छोड़ दें. लेट्स से कि दोनों दो कर लें एवरेजेस, राइट? एक मेल 30 ईयर ओल्ड, इंटर किया हुआ है, 70,000 हाउस होल्ड इनकम है. अब इसके लिए प्रोडक्ट बनाएं, राइट? वो प्रोडक्ट हम सब के लिए चलेगा और उनके लिए चलेगा जो किसी. अच्छा, पहली चीज़ आई थिंक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है, मुझे इसमें पैटर्न नज़र आया है. आपके ख्याल में पाकिस्तान में कितने % लोग हैं जो यूनिवर्सिटी से ग्रेजुएट करते हैं? सो हमारा जो एवरेज पाकिस्तानी है वो इंटर नहीं किया हुआ उसने कोई 6 या 7 जमातें पढ़ी हुई हैं. सो इट्स वो, अब उसके लिए आप डिज़ाइन करें ना. सो देन द सिस्टम विल नॉट बी द सिस्टम दैट मोस्ट ऑफ करीम्स यूजर्स विल एक्चुअली यूज़, राइट? उसके लिए फिर क्या होता है, एंड वी डू दिस ऑल द टाइम, डेटा बहुत ज़रूरी होता है, लेकिन यू हैव टू फर्स्ट सॉर्ट ऑफ सेगमेंट बाय ट्रीटिंग पीपल एज पीपल. यू उसमें हम पर्सोनास बनाते हैं फॉर इंस्टेंस, राइट? पर्सोनास का मकसद क्या होता है? व्हाट इज़ द काइंड ऑफ पर्सन यू वांट टू डिज़ाइन फॉर. सो यू माइट से कि यार हमारी जो करीम कार की सर्विस है उसके लिए द सॉर्ट ऑफ यूज़र वी वांट टू टारगेट इज़ लेट्स से मिड करियर प्रोफेशनल जिसके पास गाड़ी है लेकिन वो यूज़ नहीं करना चाहता या वो ट्रैफिक अवॉइड करता है, whatever that may be, that's a persona. उसके अंदर you might say कि अच्छा income band क्या है? Let's take an average of the income band. There is usefulness for averages, right? पर आपको पहले you've kind of defined a certain segment. उसके अंदर then you're taking some averages. अगर आप सबको average करना शुरू करेंगे वो बंदा exist नहीं करता as we've seen, and also our idea of averages is very flawed. वही वाली चीज़ के असल में वो 7 बातें पास होगा मुझे नहीं पता, पर probably हमारा drop out rate of आउट ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन जो हैं, जो बच्चे स्कूल में होने चाहिए, लाइक आउट ऑफ स्कूल हैं, इट्स द हाईएस्ट इन द वर्ल्ड. सो इसलिए एवरेज पाकिस्तानी हमसे किसी से रिलेटेबल नहीं है. जितना मर्जी हम लोग सोच लें ना कि हम मिडिल क्लास हैं, ये होता है, हम सारे बहुत प्रिविलेज हैं, राइट? जस्ट बाय लिविंग इन बिगर सिटीज़, हैविंग जॉब्स, हैविंग इवन बाइक्स, बहुत प्रिविलेज है हमारे पास. सो हमारा पर्सपेक्टिव बहुत स्क्यूड होता है हमेशा.
बेसिकली आप डिज़ाइन वर्क में हैं, सो दिस इज़ for communications purposes, design for communications?
Here, so we do few different things. जो हमारी 2 teams हैं मेन, या एक research and service design है, एक user experience design है. User experience में we have clients from the startup world. We've built apps for them. We've built portals. You might think of as digital products. जो रिसर्च वाली साइड है उसमें हम डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर में बहुत काम करते हैं. तो उसमें हेल्थ केयर में भी हैं प्रोजेक्ट्स. देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन प्रोजेक्ट्स फॉर स्पेशली लो इनकम लो टेक वुमेन पे फोकस, या लो टेक लो इनकम ऑडियंस यूजर्स पे फोकस्ड. अक्सर जो प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं वो इसी तरह वो अर्बन एरियाज़ में मोस्टली नहीं होते, या होते भी हैं तो लो इनकम यूजर्स के ऊपर फोकस होते हैं. दैट्स वेयर अ लॉट ऑफ रिसर्च वर्क कम्स इन. जो यूएक्स डिज़ाइन साइड पे भी है उसमें भी वी डोंट टेक एनी प्रोजेक्ट्स दैट डोंट इन्वॉल्व डायरेक्ट यूज़र रिसर्च. तो उसमें चाहे आप एक स्टार्टअप आता है और वो कहते हैं ऐप डिज़ाइन करनी है, अनलेस वी हैव एक्सेस टू एंड वी कैन कंडक्ट रिसर्च विद देयर यूजर्स, हम उस पर काम नहीं करेंगे. एंड बिकॉज वी बिलीव के रिसर्च के बगैर हम में से किसी के पास आंसर्स नहीं है, बिकॉज वी नॉट आवर ओन यूजर्स, सो वी नीड टू कंडक्ट रिसर्च विद द यूजर्स. Thank you all for coming. This was Design and War. We will be hosting episode 4 of Design in the World sometime next month. Thank you.